My heart still skips a beat every time I think about that day. The day I realized my own sister had betrayed me in the worst way imaginable. I remember standing in my kitchen, the sunlight spilling through the windows, making everything look calm and perfect, like a postcard. My little ones were playing in the living room, laughing, the kind of laughter that melts your soul. And there I was, holding my phone, staring at a message that froze me in place. It wasn't just any message, it was a photo, perfectly clear, undeniable. My husband, my own husband, and my sister, laughing, cozy, wrapped in a moment that wasn't meant for my eyes. I felt my stomach drop, my chest tighten. Everything I had worked for, every late night, every worry, every sleepless night for our little family, felt like it had been erased in an instant. And I had always trusted her. My sister, the one I shared secrets with, the one I called family before anyone else. I had helped her move into her first apartment, lent her money when she was down, even covered for her more than once. Never once did I imagine betrayal like this. Not from her, not from someone who shared my blood. I remember sitting down at the kitchen table, my hands trembling, trying to breathe. My children's laughter drifted to me, and for a moment I wished I could melt into the floor and disappear. How could someone you loved and trusted so deeply just take everything from you? Looking back, maybe there were signs, little things I brushed off. Tiny, jealous comments, offhand remarks about how perfect my life seemed, hints that she thought she deserved more than she had. But I was blind. I wanted to believe in family. I wanted to believe in love. And that belief, it cost me dearly. I tried to remember the good times because Auntie May always says, hold on to the good, but don't let it blind you to the truth. And the good was plenty. The days we laughed together, the holidays we shared, the way she would coo over my babies, acting like the most doting aunt. I smiled thinking of those times. But deep down, a tiny voice whispered, she's capable of betrayal. I remembered our family dinners. My sister would always smile a little too wide sometimes, watching how happy I was, and I would laugh, oblivious, never noticing the calculating glint behind her eyes. It's funny, isn't it? How someone can sit across from you, laugh at your jokes, cry at your stories, and all the while plot the worst kind of hurt. I remember the first moment I realized my marriage wasn't what I thought it was. Not that I knew the full extent, not yet, just little things. The phone calls that went unanswered, the sudden defensiveness, the secretive smiles when my sister's name came up. But I told myself, maybe it's nothing. I wanted to believe. I always wanted to believe. And then that message, that undeniable proof. I felt the floor beneath me shift. The world as I knew it, it tilted. And all I could think about was my babies, my little ones. I had to protect them. I had to breathe. I had to survive this storm. But here's the cruelest part. Even after taking everything, my trust, my home, the man I loved, she had the audacity to come to me, asking for my blessing. Can you imagine that? She wanted me to smile, to nod, to approve of the thing that shattered my life. It was unbearable. I felt rage, sorrow, and disbelief all tangled together, a knot in my chest I couldn't undo. I walked around my empty house, trying to make sense of it. I found myself talking aloud, as if the walls could offer me some comfort. Why, sister? Why would you do this? Didn't I love you enough? Didn't I share everything with you? The silence answered me. No comfort, no reason. Just the cold, hard truth that some betrayals have no logic. And in that silence, I remembered something my mother always said. The worst betrayals come from those you hold closest. But how you rise, that defines you. I clung to that, because as broken as I felt, I knew one thing. I couldn't stay shattered forever. I couldn't let this define me. My children, my home, my heart, they deserved better. And I would find my strength. So I began to notice everything, the cracks I had ignored, the little lies, the hidden texts, the way my husband looked at her, not with love for me, but with admiration for her manipulations. It was heartbreaking, but also clarifying. I saw who they truly were, and Auntie May says, once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. By the end of that day, I had decided. I wouldn't scream, I wouldn't cry in public, I would watch, I would learn, I would wait. Because every story has a moment before the storm, and mine was just beginning. And oh my dear, if you think the worst is over, trust me, you haven't seen anything yet. I couldn't sleep that night. I sat by my bedroom window, watching the city lights twinkle like they didn't know my world had fallen apart. My hands were still shaking, my mind racing through every memory of my sister, my husband, our life. It felt like someone had pulled the rug out from under me, and I was left dangling, suspended over an abyss I didn't know existed. And here's something Auntie May always whispers in your ear, the kind of wisdom you never really understand until your heart shatters. The people who hurt you the most often wear the masks you've trusted for years. My sister had worn that mask so well. She smiled, laughed, held my children, and I believed every bit of it. I thought she loved me. I thought she was family. I remembered that weekend when everything changed, though I didn't know it at the time. The house smelled like freshly baked bread, my favorite. The kids were running around, sticky little hands leaving trails on the floor, and my husband came home earlier than usual. I had been humming while washing dishes, thinking about tomorrow's grocery list, completely oblivious. But there was something in his eyes, a glance I couldn't quite place. And then she called. My sister. Her voice was light, teasing. "Hey, got a minute?" I smiled, thinking she needed advice about her new job or maybe wanted to borrow something. But there was something off, a tone I didn't recognize. She had never sounded this calculated, and I didn't notice at the time. I never do. Not until it's too late. Days turned into weeks, and I began to notice little things. My husband would hide his phone screen, laugh at messages when he thought I wasn't looking, and call me with excuses that didn't sit right. My sister's visits became more frequent, always just dropping by, always staying longer than she needed, always lingering in the corners of my home that I thought were private. And Auntie May's voice, always soft but firm, echoed in my head, "When the calm is too perfect, watch the shadows." I wanted to confront them. Oh, I wanted to, but there's a fear you don't talk about, a fear that grips mothers in their deepest core. I feared the truth more than the lie, because if I confronted them and was wrong, what then? But if I was right, well, that would be a firestorm, and there would be no turning back. One evening, after putting the kids to bed, I finally gave in to that fear. I picked up my laptop, pretending to check work emails. My heart was racing so hard, I thought it would betray me with a sound. And there it was, a hidden folder, messages, pictures, and videos carefully tucked away. Every moment, every secret rendezvous, every lie meticulously documented in pixels and timestamps. I stared at it, unable to breathe. My hands shook, my stomach lurched. The world outside was quiet, but inside, a hurricane raged. I felt every emotion at once: anger, grief, disbelief, even a strange, cold clarity. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't an accident. This was betrayal, planned, deliberate, and unapologetic. And as I scrolled through the files, my mind couldn't help but replay our childhood. My sister and I had built forts in the backyard, shared ice cream cones, whispered secrets under the moonlight. I had stood by her when she failed, held her hand when she cried, celebrated when she triumphed, and all the while, she had been quietly plotting to take what was mine: my husband, my peace, my life. I remember gasping out loud, almost wishing someone would hear me, even though I didn't want anyone to. The truth is heavy. And sometimes Auntie May says, if you carry it alone, it shapes you. If you share it too soon, it can destroy them too. I had to carry this alone, at least for now. And there it was, the video. One click and the room spun. My husband and my sister, sitting close, laughing at something that was supposed to be our private world. Her hand brushing against his eyes lighting up in a way that I had thought was reserved for me. The sound of their laughter stabbed me deeper than any words ever could. I wanted to throw up, to scream, to break something, but I didn't. I simply watched, heartbreaking with every second, knowing I would never be able to unsee it. That's the thing about betrayal, my dear. It's not just the act. It's the slow realization, the tiny betrayals that pile up until one day the dam breaks and you're drowning in evidence you can't ignore. Every message, every meeting, every lie, it all built a story I didn't want to read. But there it was, my worst nightmare, staring me straight in the face. I remember sitting back, trembling, whispering to the empty room, "How could you? How could you, both of you?" The silence answered nothing. And in that silence, I realized I was no longer the same person who had trusted blindly, who had believed in love without reservation. I had crossed the threshold. There was no going back. And then I found it, the final piece, a message from my sister to my husband. Not just flirty, not just friendly, but plotting. She wanted him to leave me, to take everything, and she asked for my blessing. My blessing? Can you imagine that audacity? She wanted me to approve of the thing that shattered my entire life. My stomach turned, my hands shook, and I realized this was not just betrayal, this was war. I sat there in the dim light, my mind racing through possibilities, plotting, wondering how I could protect my children, how I could reclaim my life. Auntie May always says, the moment you see the truth, you must decide, will you bend or will you stand? And I knew right then, with every fiber of my being, that I would stand. But the story isn't over, my dear. No, not by a long shot. That night, as I closed my laptop, a plan forming in my mind, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Clarity. This betrayal had brought clarity. I could see everyone for who they really were. And while the hurt was immense, I was beginning to understand something vital. I still had my children. I still had my home. And I still had myself. And as I turned off the light and lay in bed, pretending to sleep, I realized something even darker. Someone had noticed me discovering the truth. A small clue, subtle enough that anyone else might miss, but not me. And in that moment, my heart sank in a new, terrifying way. The betrayal was far from over, and they knew I had discovered the evidence. The storm had begun, and Auntie May whispers softly in my ear, "Hold on, child. The night is darkest before the dawn. But sometimes the dawn comes after the fire." And with that, my hands tightened around the sheets, my mind sharp and ready. Tomorrow, everything would change. Betrayal has a way of settling into life quietly at first, almost imperceptible, like a shadow stretching across a familiar room. When I first discovered the truth about my sister and my husband, I had imagined rage, confrontation, perhaps even a dramatic storm of words. But what hit me most was the silence, the suffocating, constant pressure of knowing the people I loved most had become the architects of my suffering. The house that once smelled of warmth, of Sunday roasts and fresh bread, now carried a tension that seemed to hum under every surface, unspoken yet unrelenting. The first signs came subtly. Sunday dinners, once the comforting rhythm of family life, became exercises in careful observation. I watched my sister move around the room, her voice soft, charming, effortlessly weaving conversation that drew everyone's attention. And my husband, seated at the far end of the table, pretended to scroll on his phone, but I could feel the invisible line connecting them. Every glance, every tilt of the head, every fleeting gesture was a silent message only my heart could read. My chest tightened with every passing second, my stomach twisting as if it were trying to physically hold together the pieces of the life they had fractured. I forced smiles, laughed when expected, answered questions about the children, all while feeling hollow inside. My mother's concerned glances cut across me like knives, but I maintained the facade. The children's laughter, once my sanctuary, now only reminding me of what I needed to protect: my family's innocence, their trust, my own ability to maintain composure. Every joyful sound seemed like an echo of the life I had lost, a cruel counterpoint to the unease that had settled in every room. And then came the manipulations. My sister, who I had trusted implicitly, had developed a skill I hadn't seen before: the ability to plant doubt with subtlety. "Sometimes men drift when they feel unappreciated," she said one evening, so casually, as if commenting on the weather. The tilt of her head, the softness of her voice, the gentle pause afterward, all were deliberate, calculated. The message was clear: my husband's wandering heart was somehow my fault. I felt the sting of doubt, subtle but persistent, burrowing into my mind. Her innocence was now a carefully constructed mask, hiding the predator beneath. Days merged into weeks, and weeks into months. I began noticing patterns that were once invisible. At my niece's birthday party, I observed them closely. Balloons floated in the soft sunlight, children's laughter ricocheted off the walls, frosting smeared tiny fingers, but my eyes never left them. I noticed the way my sister leaned just slightly toward my husband when no one was looking, the almost imperceptible brushing of hands, the softened tone in his voice. My chest tightened, and the familiar wave of nausea returned with a vengeance. Nights became long, sleepless stretches, where I lay awake, staring at cracks in the ceiling and memories of happier times. I remembered mornings filled with the aroma of coffee and burnt toast, soft laughter spilling from our kitchen, the warmth of my husband's hand in mine. My sister had been there too, teasing, playful, entirely innocent in those moments. The contrast between then and now was brutal, a sharp, painful wedge driving itself deeper into my chest. Each memory was both solace and torment, a reminder of the life that had been stolen from me, of trust broken, of peace obliterated. The emotional toll was relentless. Every day required a careful dance around gestures, glances, words, and unspoken cues. Friends noticed. "Are you okay?" they asked, their eyes searching for the truth I couldn't yet voice. I would smile, nod, whisper, "Everything's fine," while inside I splintered. The betrayal was no longer a theoretical wound. It had become a constant shadow touching every aspect of my existence. Even my children felt it. My eldest, astute and perceptive, would ask softly, "Mommy, why do you look sad?" Or, "Mommy, is Daddy mad?" I would hug them tightly, whisper reassurances, promise that all was well, but their innocent questions pierced me deeper than any confrontation could. Protecting their trust, safety, and innocence became the mission I couldn't afford to fail. I began cataloging everything in my mind: the way they sat in the living room, the subtle gestures of their hands, the lingering glances. Every small movement, once meaningless, now screamed a hidden truth.
Observation became my survival tactic, a way to maintain some sense of control in a world that had suddenly become foreign. One evening, I drove the children home from school, the light of dusk painting the sky in soft hues of gold and pink. My sister had casually invited us for dinner. I accepted despite every instinct to refuse. The children laughed happily in the back seat, oblivious to the tension I carried like a stone in my chest. Every laugh, every chatter, every innocent observation became a reminder of what was at stake, and I cataloged every interaction, every smile, every fleeting touch between my husband and my sister. The pressure in my chest tightened, the nausea returned, and yet I remained calm, for their sake, for appearances, for survival.
Dinner that evening confirmed everything. My sister moved with effortless charm, her voice melodic, her laughter light and contagious. My husband followed her cues, smiling too readily, brushing her shoulder in moments that made my stomach churn. I barely touched my food, observing each interaction, counting the seconds between glances, noting the rhythm of their voices, the unspoken familiarity between them. Confrontation was a temptation I resisted. Impulsive action would serve only to fracture what little stability remained for the children. I had to wait. I had to gather proof. I had to prepare. Weeks passed. The subtle signs became impossible to ignore. Glances, touches, laughter, each one a dagger, twisting ever deeper. Every detail I had once ignored now accumulated, building a silent case, a mental dossier of betrayal. The house felt suffocating, every room a chamber of unspoken tension. My heart raced at the smallest interaction, my mind dissecting every gesture, every word, every nuance. Then, one night, when the house was finally silent and the children were asleep, I found it, the undeniable proof. Not a suspicion, not a half-belief, but a concrete, irrefutable truth. I held my husband's phone, scrolling past mundane messages, past work threads, past harmless conversations, until I found the hidden folder. Photos, texts, voice notes, every secret moment laid bare. And then, the final message, the one that crystallized months of fear and suspicion into reality. Should I tell her? I'm tired of hiding us. I froze. Breath caught. Hands shook. Tears stung my eyes. The weight of months of sleepless nights, of anxiety, of quiet suffering crashed down in a tidal wave. The betrayal was no longer theoretical. It was tangible, undeniable, and complete. And yet, amidst the storm, clarity emerged. I could no longer remain silent. I could no longer pretend. Action was inevitable, not reckless, not vengeful, but deliberate, calculated, necessary. I sat there, staring at the sleeping children, their small faces peaceful, trusting, oblivious. The storm had arrived. I had seen it, cataloged it, felt it, and now I would face it. Nothing would ever be the same again. The night I discovered the undeniable proof, I thought the weight on my chest could not grow heavier. But the next morning, waking to the chirping of birds and the soft footsteps of my children, I realized that betrayal, once revealed, has a way of coloring every single moment of your day. The sun rose, warm and golden, yet I felt a chill that no amount of light could chase away. My house, the one I had built with care, laughter, and dreams, now felt like a stage set for watching people I once trusted unravel the very foundations of my heart. Breakfast was mechanical. I poured cereal, stirred milk, nodded at the children's chatter, all while rehearsing the words I didn't yet know I would speak. Every glance toward my husband felt like a trap, each movement a reminder that nothing between us would ever be the same. He smiled too brightly at the children, his voice casual, yet I could see the tremor of guilt beneath his carefully measured tone. My sister, as if nothing had changed, laughed at small things, brushed crumbs off her niece's cheeks, tilting her head in that same calculated way that once made me trust her implicitly. I kept my composure for hours,
even as my heart raced with the knowledge I carried like a secret weapon. I thought about the conversations, the subtle manipulations, the moments of casual cruelty disguised as innocent words. Each memory sharpened the ache in my chest and the resolve in my mind. How long had this been going on? How many smiles? How many hugs? How many quiet nights had been stolen from me by deception so intimate it had felt like love? And yet I couldn't act recklessly. The children needed stability. My family, flawed as it now was, needed a chance to survive the storm without shattering entirely. So I watched, meticulously, silently, taking mental notes. I observed the patterns, the way my sister's hand lingered just a moment too long on his shoulder, the way his voice softened when she spoke, the tiny glances exchanged that spoke volumes. Each small act became proof, a thread weaving the tapestry of betrayal that had infiltrated my life. The following week was torture. Family gatherings, which once felt safe, now became arenas of quiet tension. I watched my husband and sister exchange subtle signals, little cues that anyone else would have dismissed as coincidence or familiarity. But I had learned to read the language of betrayal, and every flicker of a glance, every unintended brush of hands spoke with clarity. Friends noticed my quiet detachment. "You're not yourself," one whispered during a crowded brunch. I forced a smile, nodded, and muttered, "I'm fine," while inside, a storm raged. Sleep became a stranger. Nights were spent pacing the living room, staring at shadows on the walls, reliving every interaction, dissecting every phrase. I could hear my own heartbeat, loud and unrelenting, as if reminding me that every moment mattered. I began keeping a silent log in my mind, a record of times, places, gestures, words, smiles. Each one confirmed what I already knew, but also gave me a map, a plan. Knowledge, as painful as it was, became power. And then the subtle manipulations intensified. My sister, sensing something, began to test the boundaries more openly. She would say things in passing that hinted at her innocent perspective, carefully designed to make me doubt myself. "Maybe you've been overreacting," she said one afternoon, brushing past me in the kitchen. Her words were soft, almost tender, but beneath them lay a calculated sting. And my husband, always cautious, would glance toward her in a way that confirmed what I feared, but dared not speak aloud. I felt my patience wear thin. Each day was a careful navigation of appearances, a dance of half smiles and measured words, yet the storm inside me demanded release. I longed for confrontation, for clarity, for the moment when masks would fall and truth could stand bare in the light. But timing was everything. Acting too soon would ruin the moment, compromise the children's sense of safety, and diminish the impact of the evidence I had painstakingly gathered. I had to wait. I had to ensure that when I acted, there would be no room for denial, no space for manipulation. By the third week, the tension had reached a point where it felt almost physical. My chest ached constantly, my sleep was fragmented, and every casual comment from my sister or husband sent waves of anxiety rippling through me. I began avoiding unnecessary contact, keeping the children close, engaging in silent observations. The house, once a sanctuary, now felt like a battlefield. Every room held a story, every glance was a message, and every passing day carried the weight of unspoken truths. Then came the family event that would mark the breaking point. A casual weekend gathering, meant to celebrate a birthday, quickly devolved into a minefield. My sister, radiant and seemingly innocent, leaned toward my husband in moments that were impossible to ignore. Her laughter was light, musical, but every note was a reminder of the trust I had lost. I felt the heat rise in my chest, anger and grief mingling into a strange, sharp clarity. My hands clenched, my mind raced, And I knew that if I didn't act, I would be trapped in this limbo of betrayal indefinitely. I excused myself under the pretense of checking on the children. Alone in the quiet hallway, I pulled out the phone, scrolling again through the folder I had discovered days ago. Messages, photos, voice notes, all laid bare the extent of the deception. The pieces fit together perfectly now, revealing a timeline, a pattern, a deliberate, ongoing betrayal that had invaded every corner of my life. Tears blurred my vision, but I didn't cry aloud. My children slept just down the hall, oblivious to the storm I carried. Their trust, their innocence, became my shield and my motivation. By the end of the night, a new resolve had formed within me. I would no longer hide. I would no longer endure. The slow burn of betrayal, once subtle, had become a roaring fire, demanding acknowledgement and action. I knew I had to confront both my sister and my husband, not recklessly, not without purpose, but with deliberate, unwavering certainty. The evidence I possessed was irrefutable, the patterns undeniable, and my heart steeled itself for the confrontation that could no longer be postponed. As I tucked the children into bed that night, feeling their small, warm bodies press against mine, I whispered promises I intended to keep, that they would be safe, that they would know love untouched by lies, that they would be protected no matter what storms raged in the world outside. The storm was here. I had cataloged it, endured it, and now I would face it. And when I did, nothing, not the manipulations, not the lies, not the betrayals, would ever have power over me again. The following morning, I awoke with a single clear thought. Confrontation was imminent. The cracks in my family, once subtle and almost ignorable, had widened into chasms that could no longer be crossed silently. Every observation, every sleepless night, every whispered doubt had led me here. It was time to reclaim my life, my dignity, and my peace. And as I prepared myself mentally for the confrontation, a quiet, steady fury settled within me, resolved and unshakable. This was not just about betrayal, it was about survival, about love, about justice, about finally standing unbroken in the face of those who had sought to destroy everything I held dear. There's a quiet moment before the storm, the kind that presses against your chest and whispers that nothing will ever be the same. I had lived long enough in fear and doubt, letting the betrayal fester in shadows, and the truth had finally forced itself into the light. That morning, with the children still asleep and the house hushed in fragile serenity, I realized that my silence had become my own prison. Enough was enough. I could no longer pretend, could no longer soothe the children while harboring the knowledge of treachery that had invaded the very heart of my family. The first task was clarity. I went room to room, replaying the evidence I had gathered: texts, photos, voice messages, casual glances, and whispered conversations. Each piece told the same story, confirming the painful reality I had avoided acknowledging. My sister, my own flesh and blood, had crossed a line that could never be erased. My husband, the man I had trusted with my heart, my life, and the lives of our children, had aided her every step of the way. And yet, amidst the hurt, I found a strange power, the knowledge that I now had the upper hand. I knew the truth, I had proof, and I had the strength to confront it. I sat at the kitchen table, notebook in hand, not to write words, but to map out the storm ahead. Every question I needed to ask, every accusation that had to be made, every emotion that demanded expression was cataloged in meticulous order. I would not let anger dictate my actions, nor let grief make me weak. This confrontation required strategy, precision, and the full weight of undeniable evidence. Each point in my mental checklist sharpened my resolve. I would not be silenced. I would not be gaslit. I would not allow their manipulations to fracture the family any further than they already had. Even with all this preparation, fear remained a constant companion. My children's well-being was my anchor and my constraint. I feared the emotional fallout, the destruction that could ripple from the confrontation, yet I knew that delaying action only deepened the wounds. I needed to act, and act carefully. I pictured my children, their innocent eyes wide with trust, their tiny hands clutching mine, and I promised silently that I would protect them. That promise fueled the fire in my chest, giving me courage I hadn't known I possessed. I spent the next hours reviewing every interaction I had witnessed, from the smallest tilt of a shoulder to the lingering glances that spoke volumes. My sister's calculated charm, the subtle manipulations that had hidden in plain sight, my husband's hesitant but compliant responses, all of it was now fully visible in my mind's eye. I visualized the confrontation, rehearsing lines and responses, anticipating denials, anticipating guilt, anticipating the twists they would attempt to use against me. I wanted the truth laid bare, and I would not leave until it was. Afternoon arrived with the weight of inevitability pressing against me. I could feel the tension coiling tighter in my chest, a physical manifestation of the storm I carried inside. I prepared myself quietly, choosing a time when the house would be still, the children safely occupied, when my words could strike without distraction or distortion. Each movement, from pouring tea to tidying the living room, was deliberate, a ritual of gathering strength. I needed not only emotional clarity, but physical presence. I would not be shaken. I would meet their deception head on. When my husband returned from work, casual and unaware, the tension was almost palpable. I smiled politely, but inside I was a volcano, ready to erupt. He greeted me with a kiss on the cheek, a gesture of familiarity now tainted by betrayal. I returned it with careful composure, hiding the storm within. My sister arrived shortly after, radiant as ever, her charm a mask that had fooled so many, including myself, for so long. But I would see through it now. I would dismantle it, piece by piece, leaving nothing to doubt or denial. The children ran about, laughter echoing through the house, innocent and pure. Each giggle, each squeal of delight reminded me of the stakes. I kept them close, weaving their activities into my plan, maintaining calm as my internal world prepared for confrontation. I whispered to myself over and over that I would be measured, deliberate, and unstoppable. Their innocence was my shield, their trust my motivation. I would fight not for vengeance, but for clarity, for boundaries, for reclamation of the life that had been stolen.
Evening fell, painting the house in soft shadows. My sister's casual demeanor remained, her voice melodic, her gestures effortless. I had to resist the urge to lash out immediately. Strategy demanded patience. The storm I had cataloged in my mind had to be unleashed in a manner that would leave no room for manipulation, no space for denial. My hands tightened around the notebook I had carried throughout the day, filled with every observation, every proof, every note I had compiled. This was my weapon, my shield, my map through the impending confrontation. Dinner was tense, but outwardly calm. Each word exchanged was weighed, measured. My sister's laughter was light, a veneer over calculated control, while my husband mirrored her ease, his body language betraying the complicity I had feared. I observed every detail, every microexpression, every flicker of emotion that passed between them. My mind raced, cataloging, anticipating, preparing for the moment I would finally break through their facade. Later that night, I tucked the children into bed, brushing hair from foreheads, whispering promises of safety and protection. Their trust, their unconditional love strengthened my resolve. When I left their room, the house quieted around me, the shadows deepening, and I knew the moment of reckoning had arrived. No more patience, no more silent endurance. The evidence, the observation, the emotional labor of weeks had prepared me for this exact moment. I called them into the living room, my voice steady, calm, but imbued with the authority of someone who had borne the weight of betrayal long enough. They approached, confusion flickering in their expressions, but I did not waver.
I laid out the evidence piece by piece, every text, every photograph, every carefully documented interaction displayed in precise order. The tension was suffocating, thick as smoke in the room, as I watched the realization dawn on their faces. My sister's mask faltered first, a twitch of surprise, a flicker of genuine shock, quickly replaced by practiced composure. My husband's eyes widened, then narrowed, then darted to the floor, a man caught in the web of his own choices. And I remained calm, unwavering, every word deliberate, every emotion held in check. I had waited for this moment, and I would not allow them to distort it with excuses, manipulation, or charm. By the end of the night, when words had been spoken and emotions laid bare, I felt a strange mixture of exhaustion and empowerment. The storm had arrived. The calm that preceded it had been shattered. And I knew, deep within, that nothing would ever be the same again. The foundation of our family had cracked, the betrayals were exposed, and the path forward was mine to define. The moment I had been preparing for, rehearsing in my mind for weeks, had arrived. The house was quiet, the children tucked safely in their rooms, unaware of the storm about to unfold. I stood in the living room, my heart a drum of measured intensity, the notebook of evidence in my hand, my mind sharp and deliberate. I was no longer a woman living in shadows. I was someone who had cataloged betrayal, cataloged every glance, every whispered conversation, every manipulation, and I was ready to confront it head on. My sister entered first, radiant in her usual charm, her smile light, but I could see the subtle shift when her eyes met mine. The playful innocence she so often wore like armor faltered just slightly, the briefest twitch that betrayed awareness. My husband followed, pretending casualness, but tension in his shoulders, the flicker of unease in his eyes, betrayed him more than words ever could. I greeted them calmly, the surface calm masking the storm that had been building inside me for weeks. I began deliberately, slowly, methodically. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady, unwavering. "It's time for the truth." I laid out the evidence I had gathered, starting with texts and photos, progressing through voice notes and subtle interactions I had observed over months. Each piece was presented with precision, every detail cross-checked, every observation noted. My sister's eyes widened, then narrowed as she tried to mask the shock with practiced composure. My husband's face grew pale, a man realizing that the labyrinth of his deceit had been meticulously mapped and exposed. The tension thickened with every passing second. Words that had been simmering, suppressed, hidden behind forced smiles and polite conversation, now demanded release. I spoke calmly but with gravity, detailing the moments of betrayal, the manipulations, the lies, and the careful coordination between them. The air in the room was thick, almost suffocating, as each revelation struck with undeniable force. My sister tried to respond, her voice smooth, measured. "You're overreacting. Maybe you misunderstood." But I stopped her mid-sentence, my own voice rising just slightly, carrying the weight of months of sleepless nights and mental anguish. "No. I've documented everything. I've watched, I've waited, and now it's here, in black and white. This is not misunderstanding, this is betrayal, and it cannot be denied." The room vibrated with the raw power of unspoken truths. My husband shifted uncomfortably, trying to speak, but I held my gaze unwavering. "No excuses, no deflections. You chose to betray me, betray our marriage, betray the family we built. And now you must face it." I could see the conflict in his eyes, the inner battle between guilt, shame, and the desperate need to justify his choices. My sister's demeanor began to crack further. Her mask of innocence slipped as the tension escalated. Small gestures betrayed panic: a hand twisting a napkin, a foot tapping against the floor, a quick glance to see if I had left any evidence unchecked. I pressed forward, relentless but measured, revealing each hidden conversation, each collusion, each whispered plan. Her attempts at manipulation, so effective in casual gatherings, now fell apart in the light of documented truth. I felt the surge of power, not vengeful, but resolute. I had endured months of silent suffering, carefully recording every step of their deception, and now, standing firm, I realized the truth of my own strength. The storm inside me had been harnessed, and every word I spoke carried the authority of someone who had endured, observed, and prepared. This confrontation was not about rage. It was about reclaiming control, reclaiming dignity, and protecting the family that remained. Tears welled in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. They were not for them. They were for me, for the acknowledgement of pain, for the validation of suffering, and for the fierce love that drove me to protect the children above all else. The emotional weight pressed heavily, but I stood unwavering, my resolve a shield against their attempts to manipulate or deflect. The conversation escalated, voices rising, though carefully, measured, as though the room itself held its breath. Accusations, denials, half-truths, and defensive postures collided, creating a tense ballet of raw emotion. My sister's voice quivered as she attempted to justify her actions, to redirect blame, to rewrite reality. But I countered each attempt with precise recollections, each observation backed by evidence, each claim unassailable. My husband's responses wavered between anger, guilt, and desperate rationalization. He tried to claim misunderstanding, a lapse of judgment, but I held firm, pointing to every documented step, every hidden conversation, every choice made knowingly. The room's tension was electric, a storm barely contained, and I felt the combination of months of anguish, sleepless nights, and careful observation condense into a single, powerful moment of clarity and confrontation. As the night wore on, the confrontation reached its emotional apex. My sister's defenses crumbled, her carefully constructed facade stripped bare. My husband's guilt was palpable, etched into his every expression and gesture. And I, standing at the center of this unraveling, felt both exhaustion and a fierce, empowering clarity. The storm had arrived, the betrayal had been confronted, and yet the aftermath, the consequences, the choices we would all make in the days to come remained uncertain. By the time the house fell into quiet again, the children safely asleep, the room bore the weight of raw truth and unresolved tension. My body was drained, my mind racing, but beneath the fatigue was a hard-earned sense of control. I had faced the betrayal, exposed the lies, and claimed my voice. The confrontation had shattered illusions, laid bare the truth, and established the foundation for the next steps, decisions that would determine the future of my family, my children, and my own sense of peace. And yet, even as the night settled, I knew the most difficult decisions lay ahead. The confrontation had revealed everything, but it had not healed the wounds, it had not restored trust, and it had not erased the damage already done. I understood, with unwavering clarity, that the path forward would require strength, resilience, and unflinching determination. The breaking point had been reached, the storm had been unleashed, and the future now hung in the balance, awaiting the choices I would make with courage and conviction. The house felt different that morning, as if it knew the battle it would witness. Every shadow seemed heavier, every sound sharper, every breath of air carrying tension I could almost touch. I had spent weeks preparing for this, rehearsing my words, studying my evidence, and gathering the strength that had been tested to its limits. But nothing could prepare me for the intensity of seeing them, the two people I had loved and trusted, sitting in the same room as me. knowing full well that their carefully hidden betrayal was now undeniable. I called them to the living room, my voice calm but firm, the authority in my tone carrying the weight of every sleepless night, every stolen moment of peace, every quiet tear I had shed in secret. They entered, my sister with a practiced smile, my husband with forced casualness, yet I could see the cracks in their composure. For the first time, they were confronted with the fact that their carefully hidden betrayal was now undeniable.
I want everything out in the open today, I began, my eyes locking on theirs, unwavering. No lies, no excuses, no manipulations. Everything that has been hidden, every word, every act, every betrayal is going to be faced, and I will not let it slide. My sister's hand twitched, her lips pressed together in that way I had come to recognize as a shield against the storm she knew was coming. My husband shifted uneasily, his gaze flicking toward her, then back to me, the weight of guilt heavy in his chest. I laid out the evidence once more. Each text message, photo, and voice note presented clearly and deliberately. But this time, I did not just speak. I expressed every ounce of emotion, every pang of hurt, every betrayal felt in the deepest recesses of my heart. The room vibrated with tension as I detailed their deception, connecting each small manipulation to the larger pattern that had slowly, cruelly dismantled the trust and love we had built. My sister tried to interrupt, a soft, pleading voice. "You're making this worse than it is. Maybe things weren't," but I stopped her with a single gesture, my voice rising just enough to command silence. "No. You will not manipulate the truth anymore. Every action, every word, every choice you made is here, and it cannot be undone." The calm authority in my tone surprised even me, a woman who had felt crushed by betrayal for so long, now standing unshaken, a force not to be ignored. My husband finally spoke, his voice shaky. "I, I, I never meant to hurt you. It just happened. But I held up a hand. "Stop. Don't justify, don't explain. You made choices knowingly, repeatedly. You betrayed me, our marriage, our family. And now you face the consequences." His shoulders sagged under the weight of truth, the first honest recognition of guilt I had ever seen from him. As the confrontation intensified, emotions collided like storm clouds. Anger, grief, disbelief, and betrayal swirled in the air, each word a lightning strike, each glance a thunderclap. My sister's defenses began to crumble. The practiced charm that had hidden her actions from the world was useless here. Her hands fidgeted, her posture tense, her voice cracking under the weight of the truth. I could see the fear in her eyes, the realization that, for once, she could not manipulate, charm, or gaslight her way out of accountability. I felt the surge of power again, but it was different from before. This was not just about exposing the betrayal. It was about reclaiming authority over my life, my family, my peace. Every word, every observation, every expression of hurt was a declaration that I would no longer be a silent participant in a narrative of deception. The storm that had been building for months was now fully unleashed, and I stood at its center, unbroken, unyielding. Our voices rose, the room echoing with raw, unfiltered emotion. My sister's attempts to divert, to diminish, to charm failed against the unassailable wall of documented truth and the fierce clarity in my eyes. My husband oscillated between guilt and defensiveness, the tension palpable, a living thing pressing down on all of us. Each moment of denial was met with countering facts, each attempt at manipulation met with the calm, unwavering force of someone who had endured betrayal and emerged determined to reclaim control. Future, the guiding force behind every word, every stance, every measured reaction. I was no longer just reacting. I was leading, directing the energy of confrontation into clarity, resolution, and empowerment.
By the end of this first part of the confrontation, both my sister and husband were visibly shaken. The lies and manipulations that had once shielded them were stripped bare. I could see the fear, the regret, the dawning understanding that the woman they had wronged was no longer silent, no longer passive, no longer willing to endure without standing her ground. And as I left the room briefly, taking a deep breath, I knew the next phase of this confrontation would be even more intense, with emotions reaching their absolute peak, truths being forced into daylight, and consequences that none of us could ignore. The air was electric, heavy with words unsaid, with truths that had finally found their voice. The first part of the confrontation had stripped the masks from both my sister and my husband, but the storm had not yet passed. I could feel it pressing against me, testing the limits of my patience, my strength, my resolve. Every fiber of my being was focused, every breath deliberate, as I prepared to see this through to the end. The house, once a sanctuary, now felt like an arena where every betrayal would be confronted, every lie exposed, every consequence demanded. I called them to sit again, the tension palpable, my hands gripping the notebook that had been my weapon, my anchor, and my shield. My sister's posture was rigid, eyes darting, as though searching for some escape that did not exist. My husband shifted uncomfortably, his shoulders hunched, the weight of guilt pressing down, making him appear smaller, more fragile than I had ever seen him. I felt no triumph in this moment, only the immense responsibility of confronting the truth fully, of asserting the boundaries that had been crossed, of reclaiming the peace that had been stolen. I began by recounting, calmly but forcefully, every moment of deception I had witnessed, every collusion between them that had undermined our family, every manipulation meant to cover their tracks. Each word landed like a strike, carefully measured, backed by undeniable evidence, leaving no room for denial or misdirection. My sister's lips pressed together tightly, her eyes glimmering with a mixture of fear and regret, while my husband avoided my gaze, unable to meet the consequence of his actions. "You see," I said, my voice low but piercing, "this is not just about mistakes. This is not about misunderstandings. This is about choices. Choices that you both made, knowingly, repeatedly, and without regard for the people who trusted you the most. Every act of deceit has been cataloged, every hidden conversation remembered, every subtle manipulation exposed. And now you are here, facing the truth that cannot be undone." My sister's voice trembled as she tried to defend herself. I I didn't mean for it to happen this way. I interrupted, gently but firmly. Intentions do not erase actions. Excuses cannot undo betrayal. You made the choice to cross boundaries, to manipulate trust, and now you must take responsibility for the consequences. The room was silent for a moment, the only sound the quiet rustle of pages as I shifted evidence in my notebook, each page a testament to months of careful observation and unyielding attention. I could see the shift in their expressions, a subtle cracking of the defenses they had relied on for so long. My sister's hands trembled slightly, a sign of the panic I had anticipated but now witnessed in real time. My husband's jaw tightened, his hands curling into fists, the internal battle between guilt, shame, and desperate rationalization etched across his face. I remained calm, a steady presence amid the emotional storm, aware that my control over the situation was as crucial as the evidence I presented. The confrontation escalated, voices rising, emotions spilling over. I allowed myself to speak of the hurt, the sleepless nights, the constant tension, the erosion of trust that had accompanied their betrayal. But I spoke not just to accuse, but to assert boundaries, to reclaim authority, to protect what remained of our family. Each revelation, Each undeniable fact forced them to face the consequences of their choices, and I could see the weight of realization pressing heavily upon them. My sister attempted to manipulate, to charm, to redirect blame, but I countered every move with precision, every denial met with irrefutable proof, every deflection met with unwavering calm. My husband's attempts to justify his actions faltered under the scrutiny of the facts I presented, his carefully constructed excuses dissolving in the light of the truth I presented. The storm inside me had transformed from rage to clarity, from pain to purpose, from betrayal to resolve. Hours passed in this emotional crucible. Every word spoken, every tear shed, every quiver in their voices was a testament to the gravity of what had been done and the power of facing it openly. I felt exhaustion seep into my bones, yet beneath it was a fierce, unyielding strength. The confrontation had reached its zenith, the emotional tension at its peak, and yet there was still one final step before resolution could be approached. I stood, my gaze unwavering, my voice carrying the weight of authority and protection. You have both seen the truth tonight. You have faced the undeniable reality of your choices. And now, the next steps must be decided. There can be no turning back. No denial, no avoidance. The family has been fractured, trust has been broken, and the path forward depends on accountability, honesty, and the willingness to face the consequences of your actions fully. The room was silent, the only sound the quiet, tense breathing of those who had finally understood the depth of what had been done and the power of facing it openly. My sister's eyes filled with tears, my husband's face was pale, and I realized that the confrontation had stripped away every false layer, leaving only raw truth, raw emotion, and the responsibility to move forward with clarity and integrity. I left the room briefly, needing to gather my own thoughts, to center myself before the final phase of decision-making. As I returned, I knew that the most challenging part of this confrontation was yet to come. The emotional fallout, the reconciliation or separation of paths, the determination of consequences, all awaited. And I understood with a quiet but unshakable certainty that the choices I made in the coming hours would shape not only the future of my family, but the very foundation of my life. The storm had passed, but the reckoning remained. I had faced betrayal, exposed deception, and asserted my voice, but the future, with all of its uncertainty, loomed large. The next chapter, the process of reclaiming life, healing, and establishing boundaries, was about to begin. And I knew, deep in my heart, that I would emerge stronger, more resilient, and more determined than ever to protect the family and the peace that had been nearly stolen from me. The house was quiet now, but it was a different kind of quiet, not the heavy tension that had hung for weeks, not the suffocating weight of betrayal and deception. No, this was a quiet that hinted at a new beginning, a fragile but undeniable promise of clarity and control. I walked through the room slowly, my hands brushing over surfaces that had once felt like a trap, feeling the subtle relief that comes when a storm has passed, but before the healing has fully taken hold. The children's laughter was the first sound that reached my ears, a small golden thread of normalcy in the wreckage of what had been broken. They were safe, untainted by the betrayal that had once threatened to erode everything. Their trust in me, unshaken, became the cornerstone of my own resilience. It reminded me why I had endured the sleepless nights, the creeping doubt, the endless anxiety that had gnawed at the edges of my mind. Every tear, every moment of anguish had been for this, their protection, their sense of stability, their security in a home where love, not betrayal, would reign. I began to reclaim my life in small, deliberate steps. First, I removed every lingering trace of manipulation, every reminder of deceit, the photos, the messages, the subtle tokens of broken trust, all carefully stored, cataloged, and then locked away, no longer dictating my thoughts, no longer holding me hostage. Each removal was a small act of liberation, a reclaiming of the space that had been tainted by treachery. The air felt lighter, cleaner, freer, as though the very walls themselves were breathing in relief. Yet, reclaiming life was not only about cleaning spaces, it was about fortifying my mind. Therapy sessions, long walks in the early morning, journaling, and meditation became my armor. Each practice reminded me that healing was not a destination, but a process, that my emotions, raw and complicated, were valid, and that reclaiming peace required both courage and consistency. I learned to confront the lingering shadows of fear, the flashbacks of manipulation, and the instinctive anxiety that betrayal implants. Slowly, deliberately, I transformed them from paralyzing forces into tools of awareness and resilience. Connections that had frayed during the storm began to mend. Friends who had stood quietly by, sensing my turmoil but respecting my space, became pillars of support. Family members, cautiously, began to re-engage, drawn by my strength, my clarity, my refusal to be diminished by deceit. It was a delicate dance, rebuilding trust where suspicion had taken root. But it was a dance I led with care, with intention, with the unwavering knowledge that my boundaries were sacred and non-negotiable. I reflected often on the sister who had betrayed me and the husband who had faltered. I thought of them not with vengeance, not with spite, but with a sober understanding of the choices they had made and the consequences that naturally followed. Justice, I realized, does not always require spectacle. It can be quiet, deliberate, inevitable. By removing toxic influences from my immediate life and asserting boundaries, I enacted my own form of justice: protection of my children, preservation of my own dignity, and reclamation of my inner peace.
Each day, I took back a little more. A walk through the park without anxiety, a conversation without suspicion, a moment of laughter without guilt. The children thrived, their joy a testament to the resilience of love over deception. I nurtured them with an intensity born from understanding the fragility of trust, the preciousness of security, and the absolute necessity of a safe, loving environment. Yet the process of reclaiming life was not linear. Some mornings were heavy, laden with memories of betrayal, flashes of conversations, the sting of disbelief that had once dominated my world. But each morning also brought a chance to act differently, to choose strength over despair, to embody the lessons learned from having been broken, yet refusing to remain shattered. I discovered that empowerment was not a sudden transformation, but a series of conscious choices, small victories in reclaiming authority over my thoughts, my home, and my family. I also discovered the beauty of self-care in ways I had previously neglected. Long baths, writing letters I would never send, quiet moments with a book, and gentle indulgences became rituals of renewal. These acts were not selfish, they were necessary. Acts of replenishment for a spirit that had been drained by betrayal and emotional labor. They reminded me that my well-being was not optional, that nurturing myself was integral to nurturing those I loved. The path forward demanded courage, but I was no longer afraid. I knew that my boundaries, clearly drawn and fiercely maintained, would protect my children and myself from any lingering threats. I had learned to trust my instincts, to honor my feelings, to confront deception directly, and to hold accountable those who had crossed sacred lines. The experience had forged in me a resilience I had not known I possessed, a resilience that radiated not as aggression, but as quiet, unshakable authority. As the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, I began to see the fruits of my efforts. Peace returned in layers, a laugh shared freely, a night without tension, a conversation that did not hide behind suspicion. The children, safe and thriving, mirrored my growth, their smiles a living testament to the strength of a mother's resolve.
I had faced the storm, confronted betrayal, and reclaimed not just my home, but my life, my dignity, my authority, and my voice. And yet, as I celebrated these victories, I knew that vigilance remained necessary. Trust, once broken, does not fully restore overnight. Boundaries must be maintained, lessons remembered, and wisdom applied to prevent history from repeating itself. I felt the quiet power of having survived, having fought, having reclaimed, and the subtle thrill of knowing that the next chapter, whatever it brought, would be approached with clarity, courage, and an unwavering commitment to myself and my family. The days that followed were quieter, but the quiet carried a weight of reflection, of understanding, and slowly of healing. I had faced betrayal, exposed lies, and confronted the people who had shattered the trust in my home. But reclaiming life was not only about confrontation, it was about rebuilding, nurturing, and embracing the strength that had lain dormant through months of pain. Every morning, as sunlight spilled across the living room where my children played freely, I felt a steady sense of empowerment, one that had been forged in fire and tempered in heartbreak.
The first task was to solidify boundaries. Communication with my sister and ex-husband was now deliberate and minimal. I did not speak to them out of anger or bitterness, but from necessity, maintaining control over my life and the environment my children would grow up in. I realized that reclaiming life did not mean erasing the past. It meant learning from it, using it as a shield, and ensuring the future would be built on truth, trust, and respect. I focused on my children with renewed purpose. I talked to them honestly, at the level they could understand, about boundaries, trust, and the value of integrity. I created spaces for them to express emotions without judgment, to ask questions freely, and to understand that while betrayal had touched our lives, it could not define us. Their resilience mirrored my own, and in guiding them, I felt my own confidence and authority deepen. Self-care became a sacred ritual. I nurtured not only the body, but the spirit. Early morning walks, journaling, quiet reflection, and reading became my armor against lingering anxiety. I learned that self-care was not indulgence. It was survival, restoration, and preparation for the responsibilities of motherhood and life itself. Every act of care was a deliberate reclaiming of autonomy, a refusal to let betrayal dictate the rhythm of my days. The community around me responded, slowly but unmistakably. Friends who had been supportive in quiet ways stepped closer, witnessing my journey, offering counsel, and providing reassurance. Extended family began to recognize my resilience, and while not all bridges could be rebuilt, those that mattered did so carefully, with acknowledgement of the lessons learned. The world outside my home mirrored the change within, reinforcing the truth that strength attracts respect and honesty fosters connection. And yet, the process was not without challenge. Memories of deceit surfaced unexpectedly. A glance, a text, a memory of a whispered conversation. I allowed myself to feel the sting, but I did not linger in it. Instead, I analyzed, understood, and redirected the energy into strengthening the bonds that truly mattered, the trust and love of my children, the clarity of my own convictions, and the commitment to a life free from manipulation. There were moments of quiet triumph, a day spent laughing with the children, a conversation that flowed without tension, a night of uninterrupted sleep. Small victories that stitched together created a tapestry of recovery. Each act, each moment, was a reinforcement of the choice I had made to reclaim my life, to prioritize my children, and to refuse to let betrayal define our narrative. Reflection became a guiding force. I wrote letters to myself, letters never meant to be sent, documenting the journey from hurt to strength. from despair to empowerment. I cataloged lessons learned, the importance of vigilance, the necessity of boundaries, the power of truth, and the value of self-respect. I understood that while betrayal had tested every fiber of my being, it had also unveiled the depths of resilience, courage, and resourcefulness I possessed. As weeks turned to months, a profound transformation took hold. I recognized the power in choosing life over bitterness, action over passivity, and clarity over confusion. The children flourished, their laughter a living testament to the environment I had fought to preserve. I flourished, not in defiance, but in authentic embrace of the life I had claimed for myself and my family. And then, one quiet evening, as the sun dipped behind the horizon, casting golden light across the rooms once shadowed by deceit, I realized the final truth. Healing was not an endpoint. Reclaiming life was ongoing, an active process of protecting peace, nurturing love, and honoring self. I had been broken, yes, but I had rebuilt. I had been betrayed, yes, but I had triumphed. I had been silenced, yes, but now my voice, my choices, and my authority were stronger than ever. I looked at my children, safe, secure, and loved, and I knew that the choices I had made, the confrontations, the boundaries, the reclamation, were not just about revenge or punishment. They were about empowerment, about demonstrating that even in the darkest moments of betrayal, a mother's strength can restore light, rebuild trust, and create a sanctuary of love that cannot be shaken. In that moment, I allowed myself a small, quiet smile. The road had been painful, tumultuous, and filled with uncertainty, but it had brought clarity. My life was no longer defined by the betrayal of others, but by my courage, my resilience, and my unwavering commitment to those I loved most. The children's laughter filled the room, the walls once heavy with tension now resonating with warmth, and I knew the journey forward, though still delicate, would be guided by love, wisdom, and the fierce protection of everything that mattered. The sister, who had once shattered trust, would face her own consequences, in ways subtle and inevitable. The husband who had betrayed would confront the reality of his choices, and in the quiet spaces of reflection, both would see that the life they disrupted could never erase the life that had been reclaimed. I had emerged not broken, not bitter, but powerful, centered, and unyielding. As night fell, I sat in the quiet of the home, children asleep, reflecting on the journey. The betrayal had been profound, the confrontation intense, and the reclamation ongoing. But I felt the unshakable truth settle in my heart. Resilience is born in suffering. Empowerment is forged in action. And love, especially a mother's love, can rebuild even the most shattered of worlds. And in that knowledge, I rested, confident, strong, and ready to face whatever the future held. Life has a way of testing us in ways we never expect. Betrayal can come from the most unexpected places: the people we trust, the people we love, even the people we call family. I have learned that the pain is real, the heartbreak is deep, and the struggle to find peace can feel endless. But I have also learned that strength is born in the moments when we face truth, when we confront deception, and when we refuse to allow others' choices to define our worth. Looking back, every tear, every sleepless night, every moment of doubt was part of a journey toward reclaiming life, toward restoring love and trust in the spaces that truly matter. I fought not for revenge, but for clarity. I stood not in anger, but in resolve. I reclaimed not just a home, but a sense of self, a sanctuary of safety and love for my children, and a voice that will never again be silenced by manipulation or betrayal. Healing is not instant, and empowerment is not a final destination. It is a daily practice, a conscious choice to protect the heart, to nurture those we love, and to live boldly in truth.
I now understand that a mother's love carries the power to rebuild, to restore, and to create resilience even in the most broken places. And in that knowledge, I rested, confident, strong, and ready to face whatever the future held. If there is one lesson I hope you take from my story, it is this: betrayal may shake us, but it does not have to destroy us. Strength, courage, and love can rebuild what was lost, stronger than before. And in that reclamation, we find not only peace, but a freedom that no one can ever take away.